In ancient Africa during the primordial age, powerful beings known as the Old Ones ruled the land and waged war amongst each other. Eventually, they would lose hold on this reality, but before they left this world, one would crossbreed with a human, creating the first vampire. Hi, I am Midnight, and this is Midnight TV Talk, and today we will discuss vampires, the titular antagonist of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. If you are new here, welcome, and if you are returning, welcome back. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you like my content, and turn on the bell notifications to be notified every time I upload a video. And when we are first introduced to the history of the vampire, watcher Rupert Giles explains that the last demon to walk on Earth fed off a human, mixing its blood, thus creating the first vampire. However, this was debunked by the old one, Illyria, that stated that vampires existed during the original time she roamed the earth. We would later discover that the true history of vampires started with the old one, Maloker, who, in an attempt to create an army to fight against the other old ones and forces of good, sired a human, turning him into a vampire. That vampire would continue to feed and sire others to create more vampires. Turning a human into a vampire is called siring. The act of siring consists of a vampire feeding on a human so that they are near death, then allowing the human to feed off them, thus creating another vampire. If a human is fully drained of their blood, or a healthy living human ingests the blood of a vampire, they will not turn. They also do not need to be buried, and the actual awakening of the creature can take 1 to 2 days from the moment they were sired. When a human is turned, the vampiric bite reanimates the body and a demon's essence enters the body. The demon essence that enters the body is not related to Maloker, but are rather extra dimensional demons that can only survive in the earthly realm by possessing the living dead body. When the demon embodies the corpse, it uses the body's previous thoughts and memories as a blueprint on how to act like a human. They retain their human faces, but when feeding or fighting, they change their faces to reflect the demon inside. And with the lack of a soul, the vampires act like id monsters, meaning they tend to act upon their inner desires. For example, when the vampire Willow began to be more flirtatious with human Willow pondered that she may be gay. Later on, Willow comes out as gay.
That's me as a vampire? I'm so evil and skanky. And I think I'm kind of gay. Willow, just remember, a vampire's personality has nothing to do with the person it was.
Well, actually, it's a good point.
When people become vampires, they gain superhuman strength, speed, durability, regeneration, senses, immunity to telepathy, and immortality. When they first awaken, vampires are a lot stronger and faster than humans and have an innate ability to fight passed down from Malugger. But a well trained human can handle their own against younger vampires, as with the case of Robin Wood. Unlike slayers, the strength of a vampire varies upon individuals as physically larger vampires tend to be stronger than their smaller counterparts. But as they age, vampires become stronger and faster. However, most vampires are weaker than slayers. They can withstand bullets and are not harmed by silver and can survive the depth of the ocean for several weeks without blood. Most injuries that would incapacitate or even be fatal to regular humans, vampires recover from quickly. However, magic and extremely strong creatures can cause prolonged injuries and scars. The vampire Spike was cut by a magical dagger that left a permanent scar over his eye. He was also beaten by a depowered hell god and still had bruises days after. While vampires are immune to most diseases, if they contract a disease while human, their vampire heightened regeneration will simply keep the disease at bay. But if they somehow turn back into a human, the disease will continue its natural infection process. This happened to vampire Darla, who contracted and developed an advanced case of syphilis while human. She turned into a vampire and then became a human, thus allowing the disease to continue its infection. Vampires can also become intoxicated by substances like alcohol. Spike stated that after feeding off a person at Woodstock, he spent hours looking at his hand. Tranquilizers also work on vampires. They gain heightened senses, including night vision. Their heightened senses of smell allow them to track others by scent and also makes them sensitive to garlic. Some vampires develop low-level mind control, able to hypnotize their victims. The Master and Dracula were able to do this to the Slayer Buffy. Drusilla to Slayer Kendra, and Dawn by newly sired vampire Justin. But it should be noted that both Buffy and Dawn were in vulnerable mental states, and Kendra was trained from a young age to be obedient. If a human has any supernatural abilities while alive, they will retain these abilities when sired. The most notable example of this is the vampire Drusilla, who receives visions as a human and still receives them as a vampire. And like most higher intelligent beings, vampires are able to cast spells and use magic. While vampires are immortal, they are not invincible, able to succumb to a number of naturally occurring things, most notably a wooden stake and sunlight. When a vampire is staked, it must be wooden and penetrate the heart. Metal and or any other damaged organs will not end them. Direct sunlight will cause them to burst into flames, but if covered by thick material, they will only begin to smoke. Fire also harms them, igniting them quickly and causing deep wounds. They are also weak against Christian holy items like crosses and holy water. Crosses act like a repellent and burn them upon contact. Holy water burns them upon contact as well and dusts them if digested. In Buffy, a vampire dying is referred to as dusting because when they do die, their bodies and clothes turn into dust. Decapitation is the only sure way to dust a vampire. However, there are instances where these vulnerabilities were removed. The Gem of Amara grants vampires immunity to all their weaknesses. In the comics, a vampire replaced its heart with a mechanical one, making him immune to staking. Also, the older the vampire gets, the more resistant it becomes to these common ailments. They still need to feed on mammal blood to sustain their strength. Those that choose not to feed on humans usually stick to pig's blood, but humans are the best source for them. Vampires are able to change their faces from human to more demonic appearances. They tend to do this when fighting or while feeding. Generally speaking, when a vampire vamps out, their brow becomes more prominent, eyes turn yellow, and gain razor sharp teeth. However, the older a vampire gets, the more they resemble the demon that possessed their bodies, and they will eventually lose the ability to transform back into a more human appearance. Only two vampires are known to be old enough to have experienced this, the two being the Master and Kakistos. However, their transformations are different. The Master has a more ghoulish appearance while Kakistos develop hooves. This is because the demons that possess them are of different races. Like magic and the supernatural in general, humans are not fully aware of vampires, mostly due to them being able to appear human and blend in easier than most demons. However, there are ways to detect a vampire among you. The physics around them prevents them from having reflections and they cannot come into homes uninvited. The invitation can
You're
only
the
be
hair
extended
boy,
by
you
those
big
that live in the
girl.
home.
Oh yeah? Come inside and say that. Xander will kick
Dawn, no!
Vampires can enter an apartment building but cannot enter the apartment without an invitation. This includes dormitories.
Come in.
The invite can be written down instead of spoken aloud and can be extended by general admission. For example, a paper invitation that stated everyone's invited allowed vampires to crash a dorm party. Invitations can only be taken away by magical ritual or a new person living in the living space. A physical barrier prevents them from entering without an invite, but if the occupant transitions, the barrier will disappear, allowing the vampire access. But even with these minor giveaways, some towns in Buffy are known to have vampires in them.
Man, I hate playing Vampire Towns.
There are even vampire dens where humans pay to be fed off of because it is said that the vampire's bite is euphoric to humans. Within demon society, outside of the notorious ones, vampires are not well respected. This is either due to their large numbers and or the generally easy way of taking them out. Stronger demons usually have younger vampires working for them because comparatively, the young vampires are not strong enough to disobey them, and again, they can hide in society easier than most demons, making them capable of infiltrating human spaces. It is unclear when the term Slayer and Vampire Slayer became interchangeable, but vampires have become the primary focus of a Slayer. The existence of Slayers is a source of great fear for vampires, most trying to avoid them. And taking a slayer out is a great feat in vampire circles, and slayers can become vampires. When a slayer is sired, they are referred to as slaypires. They have all the strengths of a vampire to a greater extent, but also gain their weaknesses. Vampires are natives to the Earth dimension, but they do exist in others. Pylea, a dimension dominated by demons, referred to vampires as Vantals, and the metaphysics around vampires work differently there than on Earth. This allows the vampire Angel to walk in the sun and have a reflection. In Pylea, Angel had little to no bloodlust as a human, but when he vamped out, he resembled a purer form of his demonic side and became more animalistic when compared to him vamping out on Earth. There are subspecies of vampires like the Toracon. Toracons are to vampires as Neanderthals are to humans. They have all the strength and weaknesses of vampires, but to a greater and lesser extent respectively. They are much stronger and faster than regular vampires and more durable. While they are able to be staked, they have harder sternums, making them much more difficult to do so. However, they are still vulnerable to sunlight, holy water, and decapitation. They also do not need an invitation to enter a home. In the comics, when the Seed of Wonder, the source of all magic on Earth, was destroyed, it prevented the demonic essence to cross over into sired vampires. This made newly sired vampires act more zombie-like, mindless, and lethal. They are simply referred to as zompires. While some can resist the urge, vampires are undoubtedly agents of evil. Vampires Angel and Spike both regained their souls, thus gaining a conscience, prompting them to no longer feed on humans and also fight to protect them. Vampire dens allow vampires to feed without fear of being hunted. Vampires were banished from Earth along with all other demons during the Battle of the Reckoning, led by the Slayer Buffy and the Slayer organization. Here are some notable vampires. The Master, the oldest known vampire and the vampire to have taken out Slayer Buffy Summers. Angelus or Angel. Angelus was known as the vampire with the angelic face. He was known for his sadistic ways where he would mentally torture his victims before feeding on them. Eventually, he would become cursed with a soul, causing him to feel the guilt of all the evil acts he has committed. After, he would change his name to Angel and fight on the side of good and thus gain a reputation of being a good vampire. Spike, the vampiric grandson of Angel, Spike is notorious amongst vampires and some forces of good due to him having taken out 2 slayers. He eventually would be somewhat forced to fight on the side of good, eventually regaining his soul and fighting in 3 apocalyptic battles. Darla, the sire of Angel and the only known vampire to give birth through mystical means, obviously. Dracula is probably the most famous vampire to exist, but it is said that his infamy allowed the weaknesses of vampires to be revealed to most of the world. He possesses multiple abilities not native to vampires like shapeshifting and resurrection, but Vampire Spike states it as him simply mastering gypsy magics. Harmony Kendall was a classmate of Buffy that was sired during the battle against the mayor of Sunnydale. She was never considered a serious threat amongst Buffy and her team. She would eventually be the cause of vampires being exposed to the world after paparazzi caught her feeding off comedian Andy Dick. And that is it for this video. According to Sarah Michelle Gellar, pre-production for the Buffy reboot is moving faster than expected. However, the characters of Spike and Angel have not been mentioned. James Marsters has also gone on record stating that he has not been asked to come back for the reboot as of yet. And while I do think vampires will be highly featured in this series, I don't think they will be the big bad for the season, which aligns with the original Buffy because only 2 of the 7 seasons of the show feature vampires as the main antagonists. And if you like this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more, and I will catch you guys in the next one.